Hello and welcome to Monocle on Culture. I'm Robert Bounds. Now, we're rounding out our cross-cultural summer series by shunning the sunshine and settling down in front of the big screen. And today we're covering 3 cinematic releases which we think are well worth your screen time. First, we'll head to the South Asian nation of Bhutan. Although tiny and remote, it's got a big reputation for one key policy, that of gross national happiness. A fascinating documentary follows workers in charge of measuring happiness across the kingdom. Then, Daughters is a moving new documentary on Netflix which follows 4 girls preparing to reunite with their imprisoned fathers through a special event at a jail in Washington, D.C. And finally, and with a screeching Gaelic gear shift in tone, we'll head to Ireland to jump into the chaotic world of the rabble-rousing Irish language rap group Kneecap. Do stay tuned, that's all coming up here on Monocle on Culture. Film directors Aaron Batarai, who hails from Bhutan, and Dorothea Zerbo from Hungary met while studying for master's degrees in documentary filmmaking in Europe. Agent of Happiness is their second co-directed documentary, and it follows a Bhutanese civil servant who travels around the country surveying residents for Bhutan's Gross National Happiness Index while wrestling with his own search for happiness. Monocle's Naomi Shu Elegant spoke to the directors to hear more about finding joy and capturing it on film.
I grew up studying gross national happiness in my classroom. When I was growing up, I couldn't escape listening to GNH. I was celebrating National Happiness Day. I was listening to the King's speeches about gross national happiness. At that time, I really didn't understand what gross national happiness meant. Only when we actually started traveling with our previous film to festivals, we realized that everybody associates Bhutan with this very happy nation, so happy kingdom. So we were like, we wanted to dig a little bit deeper and give a different perspective to gross national happiness beyond the whole exotic image of Bhutan. So we wanted to share stories that can be universal and can relate to people like anywhere in the world, like stories from Bhutan that can be relatable to people living in another part of the world.
Yes, and the more practical reason why we started to tackle this subject is also that when we were shooting our previous film, The Next Guardian, one day Amber and his colleague stepped in the house of our previous character and they did the happiness survey with them. And actually, for me, that was the first moment when I witnessed how they execute or how they conduct the happiness survey. And it was a very inspiring situation because they were conducting a very engaging conversation, but at the same time, the 2 agents, they were calculating and transforming into numbers, very subjective life events and emotions and wishes and dreams. And actually, I think that was the moment that inspired us very much, that we would like to do something with the happiness survey that the government conducts every 5 years. And we thought that what the agents do themselves, it's almost like what also documentary filmmakers do, getting to know people and honestly and curiously listening to them. So we thought that if we follow the 2 agents, they could be even our extensions in the film. And we knew from the very beginning that we would like to use gross national happiness and the happiness survey more as an excuse to step into the intimate and personal lives of people and not make a film about gross national happiness because many study and television reportage was made about this subject. But as Arun said, just to look behind what are the real feelings and desires of people in the country.
That's an amazing story. It struck me as well when I was watching that you had an interviewer on camera who was himself one of the subjects of the film. What was the process like of filming someone who's kind of doing your job in a way?
It was great because actually the first time we met Amber, we also got very close to him because he was such a great listener and he genuinely wanted to hear people's stories, like beyond the stats in the survey itself. So that's one of the reasons we thought that, okay, he's such a great person to have in the film. And then, of course, later when we realized that he himself is not so happy and he is actually in search for love, we thought that here is a happiness agent who is in search of his own happiness. So we thought that there's such a great premise for the film. So yeah, in many ways, Amber would ask questions to people which we as filmmakers were very curious. And also during the process of making the film, we also found a lot of these secondary characters in the film whose stories were resonating with Amber's own story, and we decided to go deeper into their lives and then create these little small portraits which were resonating with Amber's own story.
Yes, and we also felt that like the happiness survey method itself, it's almost like a casting for the film, because like all the people with whom we met, they were like spontaneous encounters, and we were going from door to door, and through the questionnaire we were getting to know them. So yeah, like almost like the method of casting became the film itself, the narrative itself.
I'm quite curious, especially since both of you come from different backgrounds. What was your sense of gross national happiness before you started filming, and how has it changed since you made the film?
That's interesting because when you can always question the whole process of how happiness is kind of condensed into a single number for the nation, of course. But what we kind of realized while we were filming is that often the process of measuring happiness itself, when two agents go from door to door knocking on people's homes, the process itself becomes like a therapy for many of the respondents of the survey. Like, for example, for the 17-year-old girl Dianka, when the happiness agent started to ask her questions, it was as if like she was waiting for someone to come to her home so that she could pour out her sorrows and her dreams to someone, So in many ways, this was a surprise for us. This was something that I think both me and Dori, we didn't realize so much, that the survey situation, the process of measuring happiness itself is like a therapy for many of the people in the country.
And I think also, like working with this subject of evaluating your life, I think it also made us kind of reflective of ourselves. And I know that like visiting Bhutan time to time, listening the life stories of people, seeing how the Bhutanese people cope with their sorrow, their pain, their loss, I think it always made me question of my own values, of the quality of the relationships, or how I'm present in my life, or how I evaluate all the things that I have, or sometimes I take it for granted. And I think it because the film is quite existential, so I think it generated a lot of like self-reflection into ourselves as well. Also like being a little bit in the middle of our career and in our life. So I think we were keep on questioning of our life choices. And what is also very beautiful, that it's not only during the process when we were shooting the film, but also when the film started to live its own life, and we were like reading all the reviews or like talking to the audiences, all these discussions became like very philosophical and existential. And I think I learned a lot also from these discussions, how other people see the film or how it affected them and how they interpreted like, yeah, the effect of the film onto their own life. So it's quite a nice process.
Many thanks to Naomi Shu Elegant for that report, and Agent of Happiness is out now. Daughters is a documentary film inspired by the Date with Dad programme, which brings incarcerated fathers together with their daughters for a one-night-only daughter dance at prisons across the United States. The only condition is that the fathers complete a 12-week parenting course beforehand. The programme is headed by Angela Patton, who's an activist and CEO of a non-profit which empowers young black women in America. Daughters follows the journey of the participants of the programme and was co-directed by Patton and the Canadian filmmaker Natalie Ray. It's an eloquent and rather moving glimpse into complex relationships, and Monocle's Amy Vanderberg spoke to Patton and Ray and started off by asking Patton how it felt to capture the programme in a feature-length film.
It's a refreshing way to tell a story that I have been introduced to that never really resonated with me after I was able to do a TED Talk, very familiar with being able to talk about it, but being able to do more than just tell people, but show people and actually allow them to take a sneak peek into what I'm able to experience on a regular basis is definitely, to me, a way to bring awareness to individuals who were not clear or just were, in their own bubble about what the incarceration system has done, not only to people inside, but how it has impacted, or I would say, really destroyed the hearts of the most invisible victim here, which are the children. And so it's been refreshing to find a new platform to be able to tell the story. And so my expectations are extremely high about what people now should be doing, because we have now brought this awareness on a global platform. And so when I say expectations, I mean it's another way for people to really think about how they can take action.
You mentioned the TED Talk, and from what I understand, the film started with the TED Talk. Is that right, Natalie? And is that when you first heard about the program and recognized it as an opportunity for a film?
Yeah, one of my best friends sent me the TED Talk, and it just kind of struck me like nothing else. It was such a powerful story, and Angela's is such an incredible storyteller as well, and she's got such passion that's very contagious. So that was kind of the beginning of it, but also just the way she spoke about her girls and having that wisdom to know what they needed. I really connected with the idea that young people are a bit more connected to their intuition and sometimes what the world needs to heal in a way that we lose when we get older. I just thought it was an incredible, incredible story, and kind of contacted her to meet with me and see if we could do something together.
And this next question, I'm really excited to hear the answer, because I was thinking about it a lot while watching the film. But this is obviously a sensitive topic, and you gained access to very intimate and personal spaces, a prison for one, but also a circle of incarcerated men sharing their feelings and the relationships between fathers and daughters. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that access and what it took to get it. And I assume there's a lot of trust involved. And maybe, Angela, you can go first.
So I think that, when people are like, how did you get access? That's time, and that's patience, and that's relationship building. And so I can't help you understand how to do that, right? So when people are thinking like, I want to do the same thing, are you willing to take time? Are you willing to be patient? And are you willing to build relationships and bring in the people that will be a part of the team that are as passionate as you? And you don't have a lot of time for training people on how to be with people. It also have to be people who want to do this work for the good of the people that are inside, and the ones who are also trying to make way and make do every day because their family members are incarcerated. So I would say special people got to do special projects, right? And so that's how I got in, because of the work that was done prior to bringing in a camera.
Yeah, and you can tell there's a lot of relationship building behind the camera, because you wouldn't be there unless there was trust involved. So that's very clear in the film. And Natalie, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, because Angela has such a strong track record with this program and who she is as a person, that I was, fortunate to come in and partner with her to tell this story. But then it really is just about taking the time. There's no shortcut to taking time with people and listening and not having your own agenda. And I think people can really feel in an interview or when you bring a camera and you have a point of view or a judgment, they can feel that. So when you don't, and you're truly there to just sort of receive, tell their story, understand, like, and kind of align on shared goals for the project, they can also really feel that. And my cinematographer was very much on that page as well and had his own family experience with an incarcerated parent. So I think that also really was something that the fathers opened up to. And it was like very much like being intentional and careful with what energy was in what spaces. And I think that's just, certain people can do that and certain people don't. And I think that's why people sometimes get uptight at interviews or they don't come across or they're not comfortable in front of a camera. It's a very awkward thing to do, but you have to set that up really carefully.
There are many emotional parts of the film, and I teared up frequently at times I wouldn't have expected to. Were there any particular emotional times for you or scenes that surprised you or impacted you the most?
Oh, that's a very hard question. I mean, it depends on the day and where I probably am when I'm watching the film or when I'm a part of a dance. Like when I'm a part of one, it can be challenging because I have done so many. But I would say today is two for me. One is when the girls meet the fathers, but it's not about really a lot of times the girls coming in, which gets people. It's the fathers having that moment because I always get to see them go through that work. We do circles for the mothers and the daughters too, but I work with girls every day. And so I'm always in these sister circles with girls and mother-daughter circles with them. But, when I get to be a part of those fatherhood circles and me not being, a father myself, but having a really awesome relationship with my dad and seeing these men do the responsible work and they want to be better. And then they're able to have this celebratory moment that they never even expected or knew how to achieve themselves, but they put themselves out there and trusted Chad. Is very rewarding for me to see that. And I understand what like second chances look like. And so I'm always emotional for them and just so full of gratitude and just happy that the girls helped me see that their fathers needed this and deserved it.
Yeah. I would love, Angela, because it was quite moving in your talk and also in the film to hear about your own connection to the subject. Can you tell us a bit about your own relationship with your father and how that's shaped your work and this film?
Well, it's great. I'm very fortunate that I'm 53 years old and my father is still very vibrant and very much so still connected and engaged in my life. I speak to him every day, see him weekly. He's 85 now. And so I'm just very grateful that he still provides so much wisdom in my life. I'm still learning and unlearning, and he is still one of my greatest teachers. And so how it resonates in the film is that I want other girls to be able to have that same connection with their dads, if at all possible, or some father figure in their life, because I know what it has done to strengthen me as a woman. But as a Black woman in America, I am who I am because my father never allowed me to submit to things that an 85-year-old man probably was told that a Black woman should do. He always made sure that he prepared me for the future of what it's going to look like because I'm in it now, So I'm really grateful that he changed. He had a different mindset than most people that are almost hitting 100 would think about a woman's place. He always made sure that my place was everywhere. And so I'm really excited about the fact that I can call him my dad every day.
Angela Patton, co-director of Daughters there, in conversation with Monocle's Amy Vandenberg. And Daughters is in select UK cinemas from the 9th of August, and it's on Netflix from the 14th. Finally, on today's show, the Belfast-based hip-hop group Kneecap caused quite a stir when they broke onto the music scene in 2017. Their rise happened alongside Sinn Féin's proposal for an Irish Language Act, which would legally put Irish on the same level as English in Northern Ireland. It was not only their rapping in the Irish language that helped Kneecap attract attention, though. They also became known for their unruly onstage antics, a lot of lyrics that reference a lot of drug taking, and the strong Republican undertone to their music and vibe. The new film, named Kneecap after the band, which has just been announced as Ireland's submission for Best International Feature Film at the 2025 Academy Awards, captures the rise of a group in an unconventional style. Think docudrama/biopic/drug-addled dream. I think we can just about imagine that. Monocle's Sophie Monaghan-Coombs caught up with the director Rich Peppiatt to find out more, and Sophie began by asking when Rich first encountered the band.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I came across them was just as a fan, really. I went to one of their gigs quite randomly, really, and I was just blown away by their stage presence and the fact they were throwing baggies of white powder into the crowd. And by the time I got through the second bag, I realised it wasn't actually anything that you could actually put up your nose. But no, they were just very political, very outspoken, and I kind of felt a little bit like politics had gone out of music a lot. It felt like everything felt very PR'd and packaged up, and then you just had these guys who really clearly didn't care what anyone thought of what they had to say, and I found it quite refreshing and punky, and I just wanted to work with them.
You can see why as soon as you start watching the film. There is so much to them and to the group and to the music and also their performances. So there's, lots happening on the screen and lots to think about. When did you first start having talks with them about working on this film together?
Well, it took a few months to convince them to actually meet me. They are terrible. They're talented in many ways. Email is not one of their talents, unfortunately. It took a while, and eventually I just randomly bumped into one of their ex-girlfriends, was really the key to it, and got one of their numbers off of her and, called them up and said, look, let me take you out for an evening, let me buy you some pints. And it turns out that they'll pretty much do anything for 3 to 4 pints of Guinness. So, no, it really just descended into, we just got on very well, and it ended up being about 4 or 5 month drinking session, really. That was like the most extended interview you've ever seen, of just me getting to know them and getting to know all their stories and just soaking all that up and trying to work out, if we were to do this as a film, what that might be shape-wise. And I knew I didn't want it to be a documentary. They had a lot of approaches about doing documentaries, and they felt it was too soon. But so we were very convinced on the idea of it being a biopic, but a biopic in real time, because I think that the biopic genre has kind of been run over 50,000 times now. And, it's always done by people looking back at people's careers once they're dead or at the end of them. And I just thought it'd be kind of fun to do it, as a band is coming up rather than once they've come down.
It is really refreshing that you're kind of watching it, knowing that they're still completely at the kind of height of their success. That's not waning at all. And I wanted to ask you, as you say, it's not a documentary, it's not a kind of straightforward biopic, and there's a kind of mixture between sort of documenting their rise and their sort of origin story, but there's also lots of kind of added, more sort of playful and dramatic elements as well. And I wondered kind of how you sort of worked out where you would kind of stick to the story and what you might add, and if that was a collaborative process with them, or how that kind of worked.
It was certainly a very collaborative process, and that was partly out of respect for the fact that no one tells Kneecap's story better than Kneecap, and I didn't want to be this guy just washing in, taking agency from them and kind of getting on with it. I just think that wouldn't have been a fair approach. The British have been exploiting the Irish for 800 years. I didn't want to make it 801. So, it was always from the very start very important to me that they felt involved at every stage. But in terms of, the script itself, it's a tri-protagonist script. And that's really difficult to do, I found out after 2 years of working on it. It just trying to have, they were very keen that none of them could be the lead. Right? Yeah. So it was like, And they would bicker. You sort of do a draft of the script, and they'd bicker over, well, he's got all the best lines, or he seems to have more lines than me. And we'd have these raging arguments about, lads, it's not this simple. Do you know what I mean? You can't just try to divide it up equally. And then the huge row they had over who was going to narrate the thing. So, you know, there was some drama behind the scenes over that, but it was good fun. Some of the more banal stuff is the stuff that's made up just to try and make it all work within an hour and 45, right? But in terms of the big set pieces and arc of their lives, it is very true. And ultimately, that's a really big act of bravery on their part, because if I'm casting a film and I ask the actors to play 6th century knights, and if an audience turn around and they think their characters are arseholes, that's just not really a reflection on them. But I was asking these lads to put themselves and their families and their life choices up on screen and allow an audience to judge them. That takes a lot of vulnerability, because as you said at the beginning, it's not just a comedy. Do you know what I mean? There is some really more dramatic and dark and challenging moments within the film that really do cut very close to the bone of their own lives. You know, I'm very proud of them for allowing me to go there.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of, I guess, picking up on that, you feel like you might be watching this coming together of these 3 slightly sort of hectic personalities who are taking a lot of drugs, and there's a lot of kind of chaos, but at the heart of it, it is really a story about language. Obviously, it's so important to who they are as a group. I wondered how you kind of sort of thought about how big a presence language would be in the film.
I mean, from when I first met them, the first gig I went to, one of the things that really struck me was that they were living their lives through a language which so few people spoke. And you know, these are people who were born in legally or illegally the United Kingdom, but so fundamentally rejecting that identity that they even reject the language of the country. And I just, that was a really powerful political statement, so fundamentally to reject the very language of the country you live in. And so it wasn't sort of something we thought about a huge amount, but ultimately it just became very political just from that very central premise of the film, that these were 3 rappers rapping in a language that very few people spoke and was quite controversial. And I think that one of the things about Kneecap, their music, is it doesn't lay on the politics very thick, kind of uses satire and uses entertainment to do that. And we wanted that sort of spirit to come across in the film, and not to be preachy, but just to sort of crack open a door to a world that very few people perhaps have seen before. You know, a Gaeltacht quarter of West Belfast in 2019, and you know, it wasn't a world that I knew existed, and I lived in Belfast. That made me think there's millions of people who must not know that as well. And I think that as a filmmaker, when you find a precinct that feels unexplored, you have the start of a story.
You do it so well, and it does really kind of open up this whole other world. And yeah, I found it fascinating and also very moving. And I wanted to ask you as well about the soundtrack. There's obviously a lot of Kneecap in it, which is great. And also some other kind of very well selected songs that make up the soundtrack. And I wondered if you could just talk about what that kind of decision process for making that track listing was.
Well, I mean, interestingly with this film, unlike a lot of films, is the music came first. Do you know what I mean? Often you kind of think about, well, what music do you want to put in later on? But actually the starting point was obviously I had Kneecap's music and I mined that for stories and inspiration. But obviously the music in there is not just Kneecap. There's sort of some local North of Ireland bands like the Dirty Faces, who are a band who are friends with Kneecap, who I really like some of their music. And so they're quite a small band, but I thought it'd be nice to kind of give them a bit of profile, because I think they're very talented. And then, you know, there's the Prodigies in there. You know, that to me was just, I think the bridge that scene is particularly shot on, you know, was the one that I used to walk across every time I was going for a writing session with the band. And I remember walking across one day, listening to the Prodigy across that bridge, and it just clicked to me what that scene needed to be. And that was the track for it. So that was kind of that. And yeah, we had a composer called Mikey J. Asante who did Top Boy. He's a very well-respected hip-hop, grime producer. You know, he's produced albums for like the Kano and people like that. And he was just the perfect fit to work with on the film in terms of curating the music we wanted to use and things like that. It was a real pleasure sort of having someone with that sort of OG status there We really just got how to bring hip hop music and dance music into a film that also needs to have emotional beats. I think that was the key thing, is you can just throw big track after big track at a film like this, but it was finding ways to also connect it to the emotional rhythm of the film. Does that make sense?
Rich Pepiet there, the director of Kneecap, which is in cinemas on the 23rd of August. And that is it for this week. My thanks to all of my contributors and interviewees. Monocle on Culture is produced by Sophie Monaghan-Coombs and Steph Chungu, and Steph also edits the show. We'll be back at the same time next week, but until then, from me, Robert Bound, thanks for tuning in.